It's becoming afternoon actually. Good afternoon. So I have just modified the title little so that to add carbon dioxide sequestration, how it can be done with a microalgae based biorefinery. So we'll discuss about some of the fundamental things. Right. So and I'll just show you few slides on what my group has done. So let us begin. Okay. Just a minute. Yes. So can we imagine life without fuel? So if you remember, the fuel looking for alternate fuels that started immediately after the World War II. Okay, so looking for alternative fuel is not a fancy thing nowadays. It has become almost a need of the hour for most of the countries, including developing or developed countries also. Okay, so if you look at the global primary energy demand, including as per the International Energy Agency report, so you can see that almost if you talk about the with respect to the fossil fuel shares, okay, so today's share of the fossil fuels in the global mix stands at 82% still. Okay, so the figure is little old, so it might be a little less than what I am showing right now because of the data availability, but not less than 80% at any cost, at any this one. So that is the same as it was 25 years ago. So having said that, the meaning of showing this particular data is that we should understand that the dependency on the fossil fuel is still stands almost 80%. That's the average global demand. Okay, so if you look into account or give a understanding, try to understand how the world primary energy production by region actually varies, you can see that the OECD countries, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, India is not part of that. Okay, it's out of that. So almost they are contributing to 31%, followed by the transition economies 10%, and developing countries 59%. Right. And so if you see the that is the 1971 and 2002 figure. Now if you look at to the projection till 2030, so you can see that how there is a huge big jump in case of the developing countries. Okay, because of that higher this one rate of urbanization, the need of the requirement of energy has increased in manifold, or going to increase, because it's a projection to 2030. So the change in energy demand in selected region, it's again a projection for 2014-2040. You can see that in this particular slide, China and India occupies the major share. Okay, the reason is that because these two are the highly populous countries in the world and are also big economies. Okay, so our demand, China and India's demand with respect to the demand of, even if you talk into account the United States and so-called developing countries or developing economies, is much larger or higher than other countries. So this is this particular slide tells us about the change in demand for the selected fuels. If you look at India especially, you see that India is mostly dependent on the coal and still dependent on. Okay, and oil. Oil means the crude oil that we are either producing or importing, and most of our crude oil that we are producing has almost gone or depleted. Though we got some new oil reserves, but that are very less compared to what is our demand at present. Okay, and very interestingly, you see that India is moving almost to the central stage of the solar PV system. Okay, and that is why if you see, Government of India has given a lot of emphasis and including so much of subsidization of installing the solar PV systems, whether in your personal home also, offices, industrial establishments, everywhere else. Okay, so per capita energy use with respect to the projection of 2030, okay, is much lower in the developing countries. If you talk about the developing with respect to the developed countries, okay, so India's demand per capita is much less, but it is significantly increasing, or will the statistics will change beyond 2030 because of the urbanization that's happening in our country, in most of the states. So having said that, one of the most notorious problem of all this thing, the urbanization, leads to severe carbon dioxide emissions, and thereby again the greenhouse gases, and of course your global warming, all these things will come into picture. So if you look at the cumulative energy related carbon dioxide emissions, you see that the non-OECD countries are going to be the major chunk or major contributor by the end of 2035. Okay, in which India and China are part of this. Okay. So total emissions are going to be almost 49% from these non-OECD countries. OECD countries, which are mostly the oil producing countries and distribution companies, countries, it will be 51%. Okay, though it is less, but if you see the demand in terms of the emissions in terms of the total amount of carbon dioxide, it will be much more or higher than that of the OECD countries. So it's a projection that's going to happen because of the urbanization. Okay. So this talks about the climate pledge that the most of the countries have signed or have agreed to sign. Okay, India is already a signatory of that. So we have already decided and pledged that we'll reduce our carbon dioxide emissions. Okay. Including that of China also. China, you can see also China has also joined, but actually it is really not happening. It's not about India and China. It's not even the developed countries. They're not at all actually doing what they're supposed to do or what they have already placed. So we are a developed countries. We are a developing economy. So our demand is very different and it's genuine. And those who are already developed countries, Western economies and European economies, strong economies, they are still not ready to go by whatever it has been placed already. Though the figure of the slide looks impressive. Okay. So now if you this one look into the literature, I'm talking about the scientific literatures. Okay. For the last decade, maybe 8 to 10 years, let us say a decade only, you will see that most of the people are now talking about the zero waste refinery technology. Now see, in real life practice, say I am a chemical engineer, I can tell you with so much of authenticity that there is nothing called a zero waste. Okay, so what we basically talking about is minimizing and reducing the waste, and we basically recycle it. Okay, so that our dependence on, I'll give you an example of water. Now, in whether it is a biorefinery, whether it is a petroleum refinery, okay, the difference between a biorefinery and petroleum refinery is only the feedstock. Okay, nothing else. Most of the processes and everything else remains same. Now, in a refinery, they uses huge amount of fresh water. Okay, to do their processing of the crude and other things, as well as generating the steam. They need very good quality of water also. It's not that you just they need water. Okay, they want fresh water, good quality of water. Now this water is depleting every year. It's not about only in India, about in other countries also. Now I'll give you an example of Brahmaputra, which is flowing or overflowing right now, just 500 meters away from where I am sitting. Okay, but that's the situation in this particular month. Now let comes the winter is chipping in. Okay, so you will come and see in January, February, you will see that Brahmaputra has dried up little, and the amount of the water which the Guwahati refinery is pumping from Brahmaputra, so they are taking so much of silica into that. The reason is that the water level has depleted. in Brahmaputra. So they are pumping silica with that or balu, whatever you can call it. Okay, I'm telling silica because in technical terms. Okay. So that silica is highly notorious for them because that is creating a lot of problem when they put it in when the water goes to the boiler. So we have provided them some sort of membrane-based technology, and it was adapted. So their problem is almost solved. But it cannot, membrane cannot be used everywhere where there is huge amount of water is required. Here the Guwahati refinery processing capacity is very small compared to the Mathura refinery or your IOCL's Paradip refinery, or even in our this one, the largest refinery of Ambani's located in Reliance refinery in Jamnagar. So we need to the importance that what we need to do is that, and what the government is asking every refineries and every processing industry to do that, please treat your wastewater and recycle it. Okay, so if you do that, then you will approach to the zero waste refinery technology. And it's not about only water. Water is an example. There are other things also. Okay, we'll discuss. This is anyway. I told you the difference between conventional petroleum refinery and biorefinery. So let us understand what is a biorefinery. Okay, so the facilities that integrates biomass conversion processes and equipment to produce fuels, power, and chemicals from biomass is called a biorefinery. Now, biorefineries can be classified by several categories based on feedstock materials, resulting products, technologies utilized, and a combination of all the three mentioned above. We can the biomass feedstocks also can be categorized by the key chemical composition, right? Based on carbohydrates, lipids, or the oil content. Okay, proteins and the lignocellulosic materials. Okay, like lignin and other materials. So resulting product categories can be from a biorefinery. Okay, it can be a biofuels, it can be chemicals, biogas, electricity, and heat. Now, to look for a sustainable biorefinery, all these should be combined together. Now, ऐसा नहीं है कि if I look for only biofuel production, I'll only produce bioethanol. That is fine. So there are lignocellulosic bioethanol refineries in Western, some of the Western countries. It's still there. Now, but you cannot make them sustainable. For them, it is sustainable because they are using such type of feedstocks which in India or China we cannot use. Okay, like I'll give you an example of corn. Now, corn is an edible product and it is a high value commercial product, but in countries like United States, Brazil, and some other developing countries, sometimes they produce corn in such a huge quantity, they dump it in United States has dumped corn. They literally took the corn in vessels and dumped it inside the sea. Now there is a huge hue and cry some 20 years or 25 years before that why US is not giving it to the poorest countries, like mostly the African, some of the African countries. The reason is that there are certain international trade agreements and economic problems which they cannot do. Now I'm not justifying their action. I'm just telling that this is what is the reason what United States has given. Now, please imagine the situation in India. Can I use some of this type of food crops for bioethanol production? I cannot use because we have a very hugely thickly populated country. Our demand for food is much higher than so-called the United States, and even our demand for food is much higher than what we are producing, though we are so-called self-sustained in food production. Right, so this is the problem. So unless until you look for multiple products from a biorefinery concept, no biorefinery can be sustainable in developing countries. So technologies and unit operations that we include are mostly same as that of the petroleum refineries. So there can be fermentation. Okay, fermentation is usually not a part of petroleum refinery. This is something new in biorefineries. Okay, so fermentation, gasification, pyrolysis, hydrothermal liquefaction, that's an interesting technology now. Hydrogenation, hydrothermolysis, oxidation, and hydrodeoxygenation. So some of the feedstocks that has been tested for biorefinery include cultivated crops, agricultural waste, forest resources like forest thinnings, and then urban and industrial waste like municipal solid wastes, and microalgae. So today's lecture is mostly focused on microalgae. So microalgae has a great potential as a feedstock for the production of a wide range of end products under the broad concept of biorefinery. Now microalgae can be used for the production of biofuels and a variety of value-added chemicals, since they possess high quality of lipids, proteins, carbohydrates, vitamins, pigments, and enzymes. So in a nutshell, if you think about a biorefinery processes, this is how it happens. Okay, so there are seeds, leaves, tubers, that means biomasses basically. So you go for mechanical processing, where you remove the moisture, where you chop them into finer size so as to increase their surface area, then put them into conversion processes. It can be biochemical, it can be physicochemical, it can be thermochemical. Then it goes for separation. Now as a chemical engineer, I am telling you that this is the part which almost takes into account of 40% of the entire production cost, the downstream separation. Okay, where we separate the product from the aqueous media or any media where it is present. Okay, because any product that is getting formed out of the conversion processes always present in a very small amount in the total liquid or gas or whatever you can say, or phase. Let us say, call it a phase. So you need to purify it. So then resultant products can be polymers, biodiesel, bioelectricity, and there are so many. This is just a representative. Okay. Now I'll talk about the microalgal biorefinery. Why microalgae will be much beneficial if we think about putting it in a biorefinery concept. Now the beauty of microalgae is that microalgae, let us understand that algae I am growing in a photobioreactor. It can be recipe pond also. Okay, so what it does, what it needs light and carbon dioxide. Now this carbon dioxide, which is always already present in the atmosphere. Okay, and that's being contributed from your most of the industries, or let us say that fossil fuel burning. Okay, now that comes and that is being utilized along with the sunlight by the algae, and they need of course certain nutrients for their growth. And what they produce is that they will grow faster, and they will exhale the oxygen. Okay, that is the beauty of microalgae, just like our terrestrial plants, right? So once we harvest, we can take out the oil, and there are so many other things can be done, right? So now let us understand why algae is so much of important, and why I am talking, and why most of the people are now talking about the algae. So as of now, algae is being treated as a green gold. Now these are microscopic photosynthetic organisms of size 1 to 50 micron. They can be seen both in fresh and the saline water. Most species has higher photosynthetic ability than terrestrial plants and produce approximately half of the atmospheric oxygen. Now that's most interesting part if you compare algae with that of the terrestrial plants. Okay, so nearly 50,000 species has been studied out of almost 2 to 8 lakh species of different genera that is available in the nature. So it is not that algae has certainly come into picture since some 2 or 3 decades. It's not so. For decades long, so many years before, algae was also being used by our forefathers for food and medicinal applications. Now it is only after World War II, in this oil, when the oil crisis has started to cripple the entire world, somebody has I exactly don't remember the name of the person who has done it, but you can Google, you will see that. Okay, so they were working in the lab, and they found that algae is growing in certain areas of their culturing ponds. So then somebody just took few algae in the hand and in the palm and rub it. Okay, so by rubbing, he could understand that there is some oil, because it is oily. His palm has become oily. Okay, then suddenly they understand that this particular microorganism contains some sort of oil or oily compounds or whatever it is. So then the entire business of oil inside microalgae has come into picture, and this is how the story is all about the algae based oil extraction and other things. Okay, now it has the fastest growth rate. Okay, high adaptability to harsh climatic conditions, production of high value compounds such as carbohydrate, protein, lipid, pigments. Okay, all these things are there. So this is a very interesting slide. Please try to understand that in a microalgae biorefinery how it fits in. Okay, I have algae. Now please understand that algae do not comes under food versus fuel problem, at least in India and other developing countries. If you talk about corn-based ethanol and sugar cane-based products, sugar or beetroot-based product, and there are so many. So algae is out of this business, right? And we understand that algae has certain higher oil yield. Now please understand again that all algae will not give you the same amount of algae, so same amount of oil. So depending upon the species, algae needs much lesser land requirement than other cultivated crops. Algae can be grown in such lands which are not at all agriculturable. Okay, right. And next is adaptability. Algae is just like human beings. Suppose today I am in Guwahati, I can fly to Leh Ladakh tomorrow where the temperature is now maybe 10, 12 or 13 degree. My body will adjust within one day. I can go to further regions of some other places. Okay, you send me to any hot place after that, okay, where the temperature is 40, 45, my body will try to adjust immediately within some few hours. So algae is also like that. Okay, so what I mean to say is that the way humans are highly adaptable to climatic conditions, algae do also adaptable to various climatic conditions. Okay, so apart from that, there is much research is currently going on two topics on which many of my students are also working, is growing algae on wastewater and coupling carbon dioxide capture with the algal biofuel. Okay, business. So, and the end result can be nutraceuticals, animal feed, biofuels, and there are many things. Okay, I'll tell you what are the things that can be that will come out from the microalgal biorefinery perspective. So let us now talk about microalgae mediated carbon dioxide sequestration. So this what I have shown you a figure. So this is the flue gas that is getting emitted from the thermoelectric power plants. Okay, like our NTPCs, National Thermal Power Plants. Okay, corporation. Right. It is amounting to 7% volume of the total global carbon dioxide emissions. A big contributor. Right. Now, fossil fuel combustion releases large amount of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide is one of the main greenhouse gas, increased concentration of which can cause global warming and climate change. Flue gases from power plant are responsible for more than 7% of the total world carbon dioxide emissions, and as estimated by the IPCC criteria, the carbon dioxide concentration of flue gas is up to 15%. Okay, now carbon dioxide capture and utilization of flue gases are thus important strategies for the sustainable operation of a power plant. So, what is interesting about microalgae in carbon dioxide fixation? Okay, now the most important aspect is photosynthetic efficiency of algae is 10 times higher than the terrestrial plant. So that's the most important aspect. Then fast growth rate with high biomass productivity, easier to move around. Okay, so there is no roots. Okay, so plants as roots, so they are fixed. I have to uproot small plants, and if I have to take them somewhere. Now algae, I can put a small amount of algae, okay, in a small micro tube, okay, and carry to anywhere, then try to grow it. Okay, there are culture techniques. If you are, some of you may be aware of that, and I can do that, right? So it is easier to provide optimum nutrient levels because we are going to maintain a culture media in such a way that it is easily controllable. Then high cell division rates, making research simpler and faster. And this statement is very interesting. 1.83 kilograms of carbon dioxide can be fixed by cultivating only 1 kilogram of microalgae. So this is the most important aspect now of the entire algal business. Okay, and harvested algal biomass has various advantages which makes the process renewable and sustainable. Now, some of the algal strengths for carbon dioxide capture, there are many. Okay, the list is endless. Actually, I have shown some which has given excellent results. Okay. So now we need to understand also what are the factors that affect the microalgae growth. So effects of microalgae species. Okay, there are many species. So every species are not same, will not give you the same amount of carbon dioxide fixation or the same amount of lipid or other components. Then carbon dioxide concentration, toxic pollutants in combustion flue gas. Okay, SOx, NOx, mercury, etc. Initial biomass concentration, culture temperature, light, nutrients, pH. pH is the most important thing when you do something, some processing with the aqueous media or liquid phase. Okay. So we'll just quickly glance through the effect of carbon dioxide concentration, how it affects actually the microalgae growth. So the growth performance for some of the microalgae can be negatively affected when suffering from carbon dioxide with higher than 1% volume by volume. Okay, so this is for some of the species. Okay, very few microalgae species are able to tolerate extremely high carbon dioxide level up to 70% also. Okay, those are already reported in literature. I'll show you what we have done in our lab also. Okay, after this thing. So increase carbon dioxide in medium. When you increase the carbon dioxide concentration in the growth medium, okay, so the pH gets decreased and a few strands susceptible to express adequate growth rate under such conditions because the pH is getting decreased. Okay, 0.03 to 10% is optimum for most of the microalgae. So then there are different other SOx, NOx and mercury levels effect. Please understand that we are talking about a live system. So when we are talking about a live system, we are growing microorganisms. There are so many things that affect, and beyond certain concentrations, whether it is carbon dioxide, whether it is SOx, NOx, mercury, or even the nutrients, they becomes actually toxic for the microalgae growth. So you can later on refer. I'll leave the slides to you. Okay, I'll share with you, so you can read later on. Another important parameter, the initial biomass concentration. So low initial biomass concentration results in low tolerance to high nutrient and carbon dioxide load in growth medium. However, high initial biomass results in higher growth rate, higher sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide fixation. The CNP required to optimize, okay, to achieve at different initial biomass concentration to achieve significant biomass yield. So these are the parameters which one need to optimize. You have to experimentally screen these things. Okay. So culture temperature plays a very important role. So when you increase the temperature, your biomass yield will decrease. Okay, when you decrease the temperature, your biomass yield will increase, but not beyond 20 degrees centigrade. Okay, so there is something called Rubisco. It's an enzyme actually, so which enhance the which is responsible for your carbon dioxide uptake by the microalgae. I'll tell you about this in one of the slides. Light, one of the most important parameters that affects the microalgae growth. So light intensity, first is light intensity, second is light and dark periods and cycles. Okay, it's not that continuously they are under light. Okay, it's not required. So the beauty of natural growth, okay, growing microalgae in a reservoir pond outside the closed atmosphere or in the under the sun, basically it's that if you have sun ray for 6 to 8 hours or maybe 10 hours per a day, rest we have a semi dark or a dark phase, it actually perfectly suits for some of the microalgae. Okay, now every species will have their own light and dark period and the light intensity with which they can have a better growth. So this again you need to screen it. Okay, so you can understand that having said I am telling so many different factors. So what you do, you fix one parameter, vary everything, again you keep on doing. So initially you may have to go for some RSM based technologies to find out how many experiments you will do, otherwise the number of experiments will become n. Okay, so or maybe infinity. So it is, that's not going to help you in your research aspect. Then there are effect of certain nutrient concentrations. As we need certain nutrients for our growth, our cell survival. So do microalgae also need nutrients. Some are macronutrients, some are micronutrients. That means they need in very minimal quantity. Okay, so there are various culture medium. So BBM based, which is enriched with nitrogen and phosphate. BG11 based. BG is blue green algae based. Okay, so and there are many other things also. So then effect of pH. Now carbon dioxide and carbonate are closely related to the pH value in the culture medium. The pH of the reactor generally expands during photosynthesis during the nutrient uptake of bicarbonate. This is the reaction how it happens actually. So algal development with carbon dioxide uptake follows this equation. So carbon dioxide plus water will give you H2CO3, that gives to HCO3 minus plus H plus, and the following reactions. Okay, so optimum pH, what we have noticed and what many researchers have noticed for most of the species is around 7 to 10, and high carbon dioxide and flue gas leads to low pH, which hinders the growth. Correct. So how do we culture or grow microalgae? So we can go for lab scale culture and outdoor culture. So for the lab scale, which is for the research purposes, this is what we do in our labs. Okay, this is set plus batch studies, best studies, and then we have bioreactors. Okay, photobioreactors or fermenters, whatever you can say. And outdoor culture is basically either like this big long photobioreactors or the rescue ponds. Now there are both are good. The only problem in this rescue pond, which is easy to maintain, is the only thing about this is that they are open to atmosphere. Okay, so there are a chance of this microalgal growth get this one contaminated with bacterial growth, virus, and other environmental problems, which is not going to happen if you do the growth in a photobioreactor, because it's a controlled atmosphere but exposed to sunlight. Okay, in a closed system, but they are costly. Okay, so if you talk about the biofuels, so first generation biofuels, they come from starch, sugar, vegetable oil, animal fats. So which is why those are not popular in the developing countries, because of the food versus fuel problem. Then the scientists have shifted to the second generation biofuel. So biofuel which has come from the non-food crops. Okay, mostly lignocellulosic biomass, waste biomasses, municipal solid waste, so many other things, right? Which has nothing to do with the food. The third generation biofuels is the solar biofuel, which is come from the algae. Why it is called solar biofuel? Because algae is using the direct sunlight for its growth. Okay. So algal biofuel, why algal biofuel, and why it is so much of interest nowadays? Because of its superior oil yields of the certain species, of course not all species. It do not affect the human food chain in any way. It can be grown in places that are not suitable for agriculture, so no problem of conflict of interest with the agricultural land. Utilizes carbon dioxide as a source of photosynthesis, so it can be a win-win situation for if we grow algae in rescue ponds. Okay, in a large scale, then somehow they will always be helpful in maintaining the total amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, right? So low cost biofuel with zero waste. Microalgal biofuel is non-toxic, contains no sulfur, and is highly biodegradable. That's the most important aspect of related to the environmentally benign fuel. Okay. So now this is interesting. Now this you can, from this you can understand that algae will give you so many things. Just a minute.